Welcome to Sleep Stories for Restless Minds. Tonight, let yourself drift across dimensions in the passenger of Elsewhere, a gentle, whimsical sleep story about Rowan, a quiet traveler who stumbles through strange and beautiful worlds in search of his way home. This is not a story of danger, but of wonder. You'll visit a town where everyone speaks in rhyme, a forest made of old memories, a train that travels through unspoken thoughts, and even distant dreamscapes inspired by stories you already know. This soft, slow bedtime tale is told in a wandering, thoughtful style, designed to quiet your thoughts and carry you into restful sleep. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the world of Elsewhere carry you softly toward sleep. There was nothing particularly unusual about the man. He wore quiet sweaters, always checked the weather before leaving home, and preferred his tea barely warm. His name was Rowan, though no one used it much. He lived alone, worked at a quiet desk job, and made little ripples in the world. One evening, just after the last bus passed and the sky turned the color of cold lilac, Rowan walked his usual path through Maple Hollow Park. The trees were spindly, the paths cracked, and the bench he liked to sit on creaked exactly twice when you leaned back. But that evening, the bench wasn't where it usually was. In its place sat a new bench, wider, deeper, made of something dark and glimmering faintly in the twilight. It looked warm and waiting. Rowan hesitated, and then with the kind of shrug reserved for when one forgets what day it is, he sat down. There was no breeze, no flash of light, just the tiniest click like a seatbelt fastening and a faint chime somewhere behind his ears. The world tilted, not with speed or noise, but softly like a page turning. When he blinked again, the park was gone. In its place, a train platform in the clouds. Actual clouds, soft marshmallow-thick banks of them floating under polished marble tiles. Lanterns floated above with little wings. A station clock reads sometimes. Rowan looked around. A sign above the track read, "Elsewhere line, next stop questionable forest." He considered standing, but the bench hummed a little, so he stayed. The train arrived without a sound. It simply appeared, as if it had been there all along, but Rowan had only just noticed it. It was silver, long and narrow, and shaped almost like a seashell. Steam puffed gently from somewhere above, though the tracks had none of the usual noises, no metal screeching, no clatter, just the soft exhale of something alive. The doors opened. Out stepped the conductor, who wore a long coat with far too many buttons, a hat with a ticking clock on top, and had, as far as Rowan could tell, no face. Not blank, not hidden. Just no face at all. "Ticket?" the conductor asked in a voice like a cello being tuned. Rowan blinked. I didn't know I needed one." The conductor paused, then nodded. "Accepted." Rowan stood slowly. "Where does the train go?" "Everywhere but home," said the conductor. Rowan looked behind him. The bench was gone. With a sigh that surprised even himself, he stepped aboard. The inside of the train was dim and cozy. No passengers, just velvet seats and windows showing nothing but stars. A kettle boiled quietly at the front of the car. A map on the wall showed places like the Clockmaker's Lagoon, the Infinite Bakery, and the Valley of Regret, closed for renovation. The train began to move. Rowan sat by a window. Somewhere in the distance, a forest shifted into view, purple, foggy, and full of odd chirping sounds. And Rowan, soft-spoken and sweater-clad, closed his eyes and whispered to no one in particular, "I think I've taken the wrong bench." The train rumbled gently beneath him. And no one disagreed. The trees were purple. Not violet, not plum. They were seriously purple. Every trunk, branch, and leaf a slightly different shade, from regal to ridiculous. Rowan stepped off the train and into the thick air of the questionable forest, where the fog smelled faintly of overripe blueberries, and the path beneath his feet made a sound like someone whispering "no" over and over again. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Rowan asked, mostly to the air. "Yes," said a tree to his left. "No," said one to his right. He turned. "Can I just walk through?" "Probably," said the path. "Possibly not," added the fog. Rowan adjusted his scarf, which was somehow now wearing another scarf. He walked anyway. The deeper he went, the more confused the forest became. Trees argued with roots. Leaves spun in indecision. One bush seemed to be sobbing gently, muttering, "I thought we agreed on lavender," to itself. Eventually, Rowan found a clearing with a sign that read, "Here is a good place to turn around." But instead of turning, he sat. He was tired, not in the physical sense, but in the soft, blurry way you get when things stop making sense. He reached into his coat and strangely found a sandwich wrapped in paper. It smelled of honey and chamomile. Rowan ate it slowly, and the forest quieted down as if watching. After the last bite, he stood. A doorway had appeared where none had been, a tall arch made of drifting petals and clock parts. No one told him to go. So he did. Rowan landed, not walked, not fell, just arrived, in a world that smelled like onions, herbs, and hope. He stood ankle-deep in broth, clear golden broth. To his left, dumplings floated lazily in a shallow stream. To his right, a tree leaned over to shake a few noodles from its branches. A sign bobbed past, written in tomato paste on crouton, "Welcome to Brothmere. Please stir responsibly." Rowan didn't even question it anymore. He sloshed gently forward, his shoes squeaking wetly, until he reached a bench carved from stale baguette and settled in. A figure approached, round, spoon-shaped, and wearing a ladle as a hat. "You lost?" it asked. Rowan looked up. "Yes, I think. You looking for your home world?" "I'm not sure anymore." The spoon person sat beside him. Most who come through Brothmere forget what they were looking for. Soup tends to soften things, even memories. Rowan stared into the broth. A single carrot swirl blinked at him, then paddled away. "I think I'm supposed to find my way back," he said, "but I don't know how." "Then you're doing it right," said the spoon person. "The people who worry about how are usually closer than they think." A gentle ripple passed through the soup. And just like that, Rowan was no longer sitting on bread, but floating gently down a noodle-lined canal. A paper boat floated beside him, marked "Next Stop Elsewhere." He reached out, tapped it lightly, and felt the world shudder. Then change. When the broth receded, Rowan found himself lying on velvet. Not a bed. The ground itself was velvet, deep blue and slightly warm. A breeze passed overhead, carrying the distant sound of humming. He stood slowly, brushing soup remnants from his trousers. Around him stretched a softly glowing plaza lit by floating orbs and suspended lanterns. No sun, no moon, just the sky itself swaying like a lullaby. And then he heard it more clearly, voices. Not speaking, but singing, gently, hesitantly. He had wandered into the lullaby market, where vendors sang lullabies in exchange for memories. One stall offered a melody that would help you forget the name of someone you missed too much. Another promised a chorus that let you sleep like you were 5 years old again. A third sang nothing at all, but held a jar labeled "Silence Bottled at Midnight." Rowan wandered between them, not speaking. He didn't want to forget. Not yet. But one lullaby, soft and cracked at the edges, caught his attention. The singer was an old woman with silver eyes and a coat covered in stitched-in constellations. She sang, "If you've wandered too far from your own little name, come sit by the fire, forget all the same. The stars aren't maps, just freckles above. So sleep now, traveler, and dream what you love." Rowan sat. He didn't buy anything. But when he stood to leave, she pressed a matchbox into his hand. "Light this when you feel furthest away," she said. Rowan nodded, unsure, and then he blinked, and the plaza was gone. Rhyming was not optional. That was the first thing Rowan learned when he stepped through the shimmering curtain of the lullaby market and into a world with 3 suns, 12 moons, and a skyline shaped like a teacup. A small dog trotted past him and barked, "Welcome to Rhymewell, where thoughts must gel." Rowan blinked. "Oh no." A passerby waved. "If you don't speak in rhyme, you'll be fined every time." Another added, "There's no jail, just public shame, and nobody wants that game." Rowan tried to remain silent. But the moment he opened his mouth, the world waited. He hesitated. then said, hello to this place with a sky like lace. The clouds above him rippled, apparently pleased. Well done, said a squirrel wearing a monocle. Rowan sighed. A local handed him a scroll, titled The Emergency Rhyming Manual for Dimensionally Disoriented Visitors. He pocketed it. Most of the day was a blur of strange rules and gently rhyming conversations with talking moss, multilingual mirrors, and a sentient baguette named Pierre. Eventually, Rowan sat beneath a tree that sang in 3-part harmony and whispered, I miss home, I miss tea, I miss simple, quiet me. The tree nodded, showering him with leaves shaped like commas. He looked up. A crack had opened in the sky, a literal crack, like someone had dropped a ceramic bowl of daylight. From within it spilled darkness and a glowing rope ladder. Rowan stood, took one last rhymed breath, and climbed upward. As he did, a voice below muttered, You forgot to rhyme. Rowan grinned, Fine, and disappeared. When Rowan reached the top of the rope ladder, he found himself not on solid ground, but inside a long metal tube that hummed quietly like a cat. There were no buttons, only a small note pinned to the wall. This elevator goes sideways. Please choose a direction with your feelings. Rowan raised an eyebrow. I feel uncertain. The elevator groaned gently and moved left. Not turned, moved. The whole world outside blurred horizontally. Paintings flew past a man with a candle for a nose, a woman holding a fish in a wedding dress, a cactus performing a monologue. Eventually it stopped. The door opened with a musical dink, and Rowan stepped out into a hallway made of old carpet samples. A sign above him read, Welcome to Maybe Manor. A small bellhop with the head of a hummingbird greeted him. You're early, it chirped. For what? For your next realization. Oh. Rowan followed. Room after room, past a kitchen that only made toast, a lounge full of people reading books written in invisible ink, a ballroom where ghosts danced with their regrets. Eventually, the hummingbird opened a door. Inside a mirror. But not a reflection. In the glass, Rowan saw himself at age 12, asleep in a tent made of bedsheets, clutching a flashlight. The boy whispered, Don't forget what you promised. Rowan frowned. What did I promise? But the mirror had gone quiet. He stepped back into the hallway. The hummingbird nodded solemnly, then disappeared. And the elevator was gone. The next world didn't feel like a dream. It felt oddly familiar. Desert wind brushed against his cheeks. Twin suns hung low in the sky. Ships whooshed overhead, and somewhere in the distance someone shouted, He went that way! Rowan squinted. He stood in a market. Creatures bustled around him, some tall and horned, others no more than puddles in robes. A robot trundled past, handing out flyers that read, Join the rebellion of slightly disappointed droids. And in the center of it all, a glowing stick in a display case labeled Energy Sword Mostly Legal. Rowan didn't touch it. Instead, he wandered until he found a cantina shaped like a thimble. Inside, the air buzzed with synth music and the scent of toasted sand. He took a seat. A bartender slid him a drink that changed color every few seconds. First time in Mundus sector? Probably. You look lost. I usually am. The bartender nodded. Nobody ends up here unless they've taken a wrong portal, or a right one disguised as a wrong one. Rowan sipped his drink. It turned green, then blue, then a soft amber. I'm just trying to get back, he said. To where? Rowan paused. And for the first time since he left, he realized he didn't really know what home meant anymore. The drink fizzed. Then everything around him flickered, like an old screen resetting. And in the next instant he was somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. And very, very green. The green was overwhelming. Not just grass and trees, everything in this world seemed to breathe with softness. Leaves glowed faintly from within. The air tasted of mint and old paper. Rowan stood at the edge of a valley filled with round hills, little footpaths, and the cozy clutter of libraries built right into the earth. Windows blinked open beneath the roots of trees. Chimneys puffed gentle clouds shaped like punctuation marks. A sign carved into bark read, "You've reached the Valley of Story Keepers. Shh, please." He stepped down the hill. No one rushed. Nothing hurried. Every creature he passed, foxes in spectacles, rabbits with journals, nodded politely and returned to their reading. Eventually, Rowan found a door half covered in ivy. He knocked. It opened. Inside was a round room with shelves circling all the way up to the ceiling. No lights, just daylight leaking in through small leafy windows. An old badger in a knitted vest looked up from a desk. "Ah, traveler." Rowan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The badger stood, climbed a short ladder, and pulled out a thin blue book with no title. He handed it to Rowan. Rowan opened it. The pages were blank, except for one, right in the middle. It read, "You're not lost. You're in between." Rowan looked up. In between what? The badger just smiled. "Keep going. You'll find out." And with that, Rowan stepped back outside. The valley had already started fading. It was raining, not wet rain, but idea rain. Thoughts fell like tiny, translucent jellyfish, drifting down and popping quietly on contact with the ground. Rowan carried no umbrella. Somehow he knew that would be rude here. The town around him was full of buildings that didn't look quite finished. A bookstore that never opened. A bridge that stopped mid-river. A bakery with only one kind of bread, but 20 kinds of hope. He passed a bench where a woman sat beside a sign that read, "Here lies the version of you that almost was." She looked up and nodded. Rowan didn't stop, because everywhere he turned he saw possibilities. A shop he once dreamed of opening, a home with a cat he'd never adopted, a face in a crowd that reminded him of someone he never met but always expected to. At the edge of town, a cafe served steaming cups of what might have been. Rowan declined. He didn't want to drink regrets today. Instead, he found a quiet hill just beyond the last almost building and sat. The jellyfish rain floated above him now, unsure whether to land. He whispered, "I miss the version of me that didn't worry so much." One jellyfish landed on his shoulder. He laughed, then stood. In the distance, a stairway appeared, one step at a time, spiraling upward toward a sky that now looked more like parchment than air. Rowan climbed, and the town of almost quietly let him go. The stairway vanished behind him. Rowan found himself in a small square room lit by an old desk lamp. The walls were shelves, and the shelves were full of things. Tiny, familiar, utterly unimportant things. A bus ticket folded in half. 3 paper clips tangled together. A button shaped like a cat. A receipt from a cafe that no longer existed. A pebble he swore he once threw into the sea. A sign above the shelves read, "Everything you've forgotten that meant something anyway." He reached out and picked up a movie stub. No date, no title, but as he held it, Rowan felt a strange warmth, like a laugh long ago or someone's hand brushing against his in the dark. He turned. There was no door, but a coat rack stood by itself with a familiar jacket on it. His old jacket, the one he'd lost. The one with the hole in the lining and the patch he never quite fixed. Rowan slipped it on. The fit was exact. The room sighed as if pleased, and a floorboard creaked open. He stepped into the next place. It was night, but the stars blinked slowly, like they were trying to remember something. Rowan now stood on a porch. The house behind him was 2 stories tall and made entirely of calendar pages, old newspapers, faded photographs, and breath. The windows were framed in bedtime stories. It smelled like the past, but the good kind, the kind that doesn't hurt. He stepped inside. Each room held a moment he hadn't thought of in years. A hallway where someone once tied his shoes for him. A kitchen where he'd laughed over soup that burned his tongue. A den with an old chair and a radio that still played the theme song to a show he'd loved and forgotten. He sat down in that chair. The cushions remembered him. A fireplace flickered quietly nearby, even though no logs burned. In the reflection of the fire, he didn't see himself, but all the people who had ever waited for him to get home. He stayed there a while, and when he stood, the walls of the house folded inward gently, like a letter being sealed. Outside, a paper boat waited in the grass. A voice whispered from nowhere. "You're further than you were, but closer than you think." Rowan nodded and climbed into the boat. The paper boat drifted for a long time, not across water, but through space that felt forgotten. Then gently it stopped against a stone step. Rowan climbed out and found himself at the foot of a great building, tall, circular, and glowing softly from within. A carved arch over the door read, "The library that reads you." He entered. Inside were no librarians, just rows upon rows of books, some floating, others humming, one or two weeping quietly. He passed a shelf marked, "What You've Chosen to Forget," and another, "Moments You Misunderstood the First Time," and finally, "Books You Haven't Lived Yet." As he walked, titles began to glow faintly. One read, "That Day You Thought You Were Invisible, You Weren't." Another, "The Time You Didn't Say Anything But Meant Everything." Rowan reached out and touched a book that had no title. It opened by itself. The pages were blank. Then slowly words appeared. "You are not behind. You are not broken. You are still becoming." He closed the book gently, and the shelves around him sighed as though they'd finished telling him something important. Then the ceiling opened, beams of light like bookmarks, and he was lifted upward. The light dropped him into a field of chairs. Chairs everywhere. Wooden ones, velvet ones, swings, stools, thrones, folding seats, hammocks strung between clouds. And sitting in them, people. Not doing anything. Just waiting. A sign stuck in the soil read, "Welcome to Holdmore. Please remain seated until your life starts again." Rowan wandered between them. Some people stared at the sky. Some checked their watches. Others clutched tickets, letters, old promises folded in origami shapes. A man in a rocking chair looked up and said, "I'm waiting for my first love to write back." A girl swinging lazily muttered, "I'm waiting for a version of me that isn't afraid." Rowan found an empty seat and sat. For a long while he didn't move. Then slowly he stood and said out loud, not loud, but enough for the wind to hear, "I think it's okay to leave before it happens." The chairs behind him didn't move, but something in the sky shifted. A path appeared, floating stones leading forward. And Rowan, quiet, confused, a little less afraid, stepped onto the first one. Rowan walked for a long time. Not long in miles, long in meaning, the kind of walk where the air feels heavy with unspoken things. Eventually, he came upon a glass building shaped like a snail shell. Above the arched entrance, a simple plaque read, "The Museum of Wrong Turns." He stepped inside. A guide wearing a necktie made of paper clips handed him a map without looking up. "Your exhibit is already prepared?" Rowan wandered through the galleries. One room was full of doors he almost walked through. Another displayed conversations that ended one sentence too early. One entire wing featured people he'd hurt accidentally, each behind glass, not angry, just paused. But the largest exhibit was a giant room filled with mirrors. Each reflected Rowan as he might have been if he'd chosen differently, braver, colder, sillier, lonelier, louder, less tired, more sure. He stared at them. Not one looked happier. Just different. A quiet speaker crackled overhead. "Wrong is not always wrong. It's just not here." Rowan turned to leave. The doors swung open before he touched them. Outside the museum was a street with only one building. A cafe. Small, crooked. The sign read, "Open until you wake up." Inside it was warm and dim. Jazz played softly from nowhere. The walls were painted with impossible constellations, stars that spelled words, galaxies shaped like teacups. Rowan took a seat by the window. The menu had only 3 items. Regret. Acceptance served warm, no sugar. Peace, limited availability. A waitress with a clock instead of a face brought him a steaming mug of something he didn't order but knew he needed. "You're further than most," she said. "I don't know where I'm going," Rowan replied. No one does. They just hope they'll know when they get there. Outside the window, nothing existed. Not darkness, not space, just nothing. Rowan sipped slowly. Do people get back? He asked. The waitress paused. Sometimes, but not always to the place they left. He nodded, even though it didn't help. After a while he stood. The mug disappeared, the cafe dimmed, and behind him a doorway opened into a glowing field of clocks, each ticking at a different speed. The clocks didn't tick in unison. They pulsed. Some spun wildly, others crawled like molasses. One floated above the rest, dripping time like raindrops. A few were shattered, their pieces rearranged into music. Rowan stepped carefully through the grass. A sundial turned to watch him. A grandfather clock sneezed. He passed one shaped like a child's drawing, its numbers in the wrong places. Another was made of leaves that turned brown as he approached, then fresh green again when he moved away. A small wooden cuckoo clock waddled beside him on tiny feet. Don't mind the others, it squeaked. They're all out of sync with something. Rowan asked, with what? With themselves, the clock replied. Aren't we all? They reached a clearing where a single hourglass turned itself over every 30 seconds. Rowan sat beside it. The sand glowed. I don't know what time it is anymore, he admitted aloud. The cuckoo clock blinked its little wooden eyes. You're not supposed to. He stayed there until the air felt still again. Then a new path opened, not through the field, but under it. He stepped down. The stairs led to a platform underground. The walls were covered in chalk, scrawled with half-written sentences. I should have told you that. If I had just said one more. Maybe it wasn't the right. Rowan waited. A train whooshed past all noise and spark. Then another. Then one stopped. Its doors hissed open, and inside were rows of empty seats, except for the ones shaped like questions. He sat on one labeled "What If?" The train began to move. Out the windows, images, not places. A birthday he never went to. A person he never called. The bookstore he thought of opening once, just once. Across from him sat a man who looked like Rowan, but older, calmer, a scar on his chin. They didn't speak. But as the train slowed, the other Rowan smiled softly, nodded, and disappeared. The seat he'd been sitting on folded into itself. Rowan stood and exited. The platform was quiet, and above him daylight. Real soft daylight. He climbed the last few steps and entered a world that looked exactly like home. Almost. Sunlight, real sunlight, warmed Rowan's cheeks as he emerged from the subway. Ahead lay a tidy street of brick houses, budding trees, and mailboxes painted in chipped pastels. A distant lawnmower hummed. Birds argued delightedly over breadcrumbs. It looked unsettlingly like his neighborhood. Rowan took cautious steps along the walk. A woman in a yellow cardigan waved from across the road. "Morning, Rowan," she called. He blinked. He did not know her. A dog loped by, tail wagging, then paused to tilt its head up at him. Rowan had never met the dog, yet its tag read "Hello, Rowan" in neat lettering. His pulse quickened, familiar yet not. He reached the house that looked like his same cracked step, same blue door. A key waited beneath the mat, exactly where he used to hide it years ago. Inside, everything sat as he'd left it on a long-ago Thursday kettle mid-boil posted on the fridge. Buy tea. Even his favorite mug perched in the sink, chip on the rim facing east. It was perfect. Too perfect. He opened the cupboard and found only one tin of tea, repeating itself row upon row like a reflection caught between mirrors. The television showed every show he'd ever half finished, all playing at once at low volume. A photo on the mantel depicted him smiling beside friends who existed only in memory, people he once imagined meeting but never did. Rowan stepped back, heart thudding. From his pocket he drew the matchbox the lullaby seller had given him. He struck a match. The flame flared blue, then violet, then sputtered and vanished with a hiss like steam on snow. The entire room exhaled, walls rippling as if made of cloth. A polite sign appeared on the door. Comfort zone exceeded. Please proceed to reality. Rowan tipped an imaginary hat to the room. Nice try, he whispered. The front door opened of its own accord, revealing a path of stepping stones floating in midair. He followed. The stepping stones led to a marble lobby as wide as a cathedral and only slightly less intimidating. Echoes scuttled across the floor like nervous mice. High overhead hung banners that read, "Welcome back, maybe. One step closer to home. Mind the existential gap." A reception desk stretched the length of a train car. Behind it shuffled clerks with clipboards for heads, pens for fingers, and neckties printed with progress bars perpetually stuck at 99%. A clerk beckoned Rowan. "Returning traveler?" It droned in a typewriter clatter. "I hope so," Rowan replied. Form XR, 7 Alpha, attempt to return to original dimension. The clerk produced a form longer than Rowan's arm, covered in tiny blank squares. Rowan sighed, then scanned the first question aloud. "Please list every decision you regret in chronological order." He set the form down. "Is there a shorter version?" The clerk blinked, paper eyes rustling. Form XR 7 Bravo, regrets in reverse order, please. A door labeled Expedited Departures Additional Chaos Likely swung open beside him. Rowan smiled apologetically. "I'll take my chaos to go." He slipped through. The clerks murmured in disapproval, their pens scribbling complaints onto fresh carbon paper. Beyond the door, Rowan found himself on a narrow gangplank above a swirling galaxy of color. Auroras, library dust, soup broth, purple forest leaves, rhyming clouds, all the worlds he'd wandered merging like wet paint. In the center hovered a single bench. Plain wood, familiar creek. The same bench from Maple Hollow Park. It waited. Rowan approached, heart beating a little faster, not with fear this time, but with something quieter. Hope, perhaps. He sat. Click. A distant chime sounded, like a seatbelt fastening. The galaxy beneath him dimmed. Stars folded into feathers. Feathers folded into darkness. Darkness sighed into dawn. Rowan whispered, "Home, please." And whatever listened did not disagree. When the bench vanished beneath him, Rowan did not fall. He simply arrived, standing on a train platform lit only by candlelight. The sky above was ink. Not cloudy, not starry, just ink swirling softly. A sign swayed overhead. Station between versions transfer lines only. Benches lined the platform, but no one sat. Instead, dozens of Rowans paced quietly, older, younger, thinner, taller, with glasses, without. One whistled. Another cried. A third leaned against a pillar, writing in a notebook that hummed gently. None looked surprised to see him. He walked past them slowly. Some offered nods. One whispered, "You almost became me." Rowan stopped before a mirror shaped like an open window. In it he saw nothing. Not his reflection, just fog. A voice behind him, identical to his own, said, "You've made it further than most." He turned to face a version of himself wearing the same coat, but his eyes were softer, less questioning. Rowan asked, "Where is this really?" "Nowhere, of course," said his other self, "but nowhere always leads to somewhere if you stay long enough." The train hissed into the station, silent and silver. The alternate Rowans boarded one by one. Rowan hesitated. The last version turned and said, "It doesn't matter if it's the right train. It matters that you're moving." Rowan stepped on board. This time there was no jolt, no shift, just silence. Rowan opened his eyes and found himself in a world made entirely of listening. Not ears, not people, just awareness. The grass bent gently as he stepped forward, not from weight but from acknowledgement. The trees hummed not with sound but with reception. Even the clouds paused to hear him pass. He sat on a smooth stone beside a pond where the water rippled not from wind but from thought. No one asked him questions here. No one offered riddles or tasks or mirrors. This world simply waited, offering nothing and everything. Rowan exhaled, and the world leaned in as if to say, "Go on." So he did. He told the pond about the bench, The train? The rhyming town, and the soup planet, and the cafe at the edge of nothing. He spoke of the boy in the mirror and the house of yesterdays and the woman who sang him a lullaby and gave him a box of matches. He spoke of longing and relief and quiet. And when he finished, the pond blinked. Once, then whispered, "Thank you," and opened like a door. The doorway rippling in the pond did not lead underwater. It led to a hallway made of wind. The floor shifted like sand. The walls were made of voices, whispers from long ago, layered so softly Rowan could barely hear them. He stepped inside and the voices paused. Then one by one they began again. "You forgot this one. Do you remember how you used to draw stars in the corners of pages? You once believed you'd find magic in the quiet. You kept looking." Each voice was his. Not from now. Not from before. Just versions that had wandered alongside him through different dreams, stitched together by memory's loose threads. He passed doorways to scenes he almost remembered. A classroom where he first wondered if anyone else felt the way he did. A sidewalk where he once turned left instead of right and never saw her again. A window seat where he read a book that changed nothing, yet somehow stayed inside him forever. Rowan paused beneath a soft blue arch. A paper lantern floated down with a tag that read, "You never needed to understand it all to be changed by it." He smiled and kept walking. At the end of the hall was a room with no floor, no ceiling, only mist and the faint sensation of ground. In the center stood a globe. Not Earth, not any place he recognized. But it spun slowly and etched across its surface in fine golden script were letters that read, "Rowan." He approached. It wasn't a place. It was him. Each continent an emotion he once buried. Each ocean a truth he whispered only when alone. Cities formed from fragments of dreams and fears and memories he didn't know he kept. He placed a hand on the globe. It shivered. And in that moment he felt every place he'd been, the forest, the soup, the train, the elevator, the mirror, the cafe, the starlight, the clocks. None of them were random. They were pieces. This wasn't a journey through places. It was a journey through himself. A soft voice, his voice, spoke from the mist. "You've nearly made it, but not home. Not quite yet." The globe folded in on itself and vanished. And a spiral staircase rose from the fog, leading upward into gold. Rowan took a breath and began to climb. The staircase wound upward in a wide, slow spiral. Each step made no sound. There was no wind, no pressure, only the hush of something almost ending. Rowan kept climbing. Eventually, the steps gave way to clouds. Not damp, just cool and velvet-like, brushing gently against his hands and cheeks. The sky here was not blue, not gray. It shimmered like memory, soft, uncatchable, full of hints you could only feel. And far above it all, floating weightlessly, was a door. It didn't rest on a platform. It wasn't attached to anything. Just a simple wooden door. He approached feeling a weight he hadn't noticed begin to lift, not all at once, but like layers being peeled away. Fear, expectation, old stories he'd told himself too many times. Rowan knocked once. The door opened inward with a gentle click. Beyond it, sky, just sky, and at the center of it, a figure sitting on a swing made of starlight and thread. It was Rowan, but not exactly. Older, calmer, a version of himself who had stayed still instead of running, who had listened instead of doubting, who had found home not by going somewhere, but by stopping. The other Rowan looked up, smiling kindly. "Took your time." "I didn't know where I was going," Rowan admitted. "No one does," the figure said. "Oh, that's why we walk." They sat together for a while. The sky did not darken. It did not brighten. It simply was. Eventually, the older Rowan handed him something. A feather. "Soft silver?" "Your last key," he said. Rowan took it gently. And the world changed again. The silver feather shimmered in his hand, growing warmer the longer he held it. Pulsed like breath, like trust. A platform began to form beneath his feet, petals made of forgotten dreams stitched together with sleep. It carried him forward into a dim hallway of unpainted wood. There was only one door. No knobs, no locks, no riddle above it, no sign that read "This way home" or "Final portal" or "Beware." It simply waited. Rowan reached out. The feather, now as soft as mist, dissolved into his fingers. And the door opened. No light rushed out. No triumphant music played. There was just his bedroom. His real one. A little messy, a little cold. The lamp still on, casting its golden glow across the rumpled blankets. The mug on the nightstand with a tea bag inside, long steeped past meaning. He stepped through and sat on the bed. No swirl of magic, no sigh of finality. Just breath. His. Now, he didn't know if this was his world or one shaped by longing. He didn't know if he was back or forward or still elsewhere. But he did know this. He felt okay. Not perfect. Not finished. But okay. Rowan exhaled, lay back, and pulled the blanket up to his chest. Somewhere far away, a train whistle sounded. And all the clocks in the field of elsewhere began to sync. Rowan didn't fall asleep. Not quite. He drifted, something slower, gentler, more patient. The kind of rest that doesn't erase you, but folds you in. He opened his eyes and found himself in a forest. The trees were tall, slender, and humming with wind. Their leaves shimmered, not gold, not green, just light. This world didn't pull on him like the others had. It didn't question. It didn't offer riddles, tests, jokes, or visions. It simply was. And it was fine with being exactly that. A wooden bench waited beside a stream so still it looked painted. On the bench sat a girl sketching something into a notebook. She looked up when he approached and said, "You're not from here." "I'm not sure I'm from anywhere," he said. "Same," she replied, flipping a page. He sat beside her, not because it felt like he should, but because it felt like he could. They didn't talk much. Occasionally, she'd show him something. She'd drawn a ladder made of lightning, a dog with 8 ears, a doorway that led to a memory. He showed her the matchbox, though it was now empty. She nodded. I think it was always meant to burn itself out. Eventually, the sun began to rise, not quickly, but like it had time. "Will you stay here?" she asked. Rowan looked around. "No, but I'll remember it." And as he stood, the world stayed exactly the same. It did not collapse or vanish or ripple. It simply let him go. Rowan walked into a clearing, and there was nothing. No path, no sky, no color. Just the space where something could have been. And yet it wasn't empty. It was full of not. The place that didn't happen. The home he never moved into. The apology he never gave. The chance he didn't take, not because he didn't want it, but because he didn't know how to begin. Here the air was shaped like outlines. The silence buzzed like potential that never sparked. And at the center of it all stood a door. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't locked. It wasn't real, except in the way dreams are real when you wake up, remembering their warmth. Rowan stepped forward. He reached out, but before he could touch it, a version of himself stepped out through the other side. This one was barefoot, dusty, calm. He didn't speak. He simply placed a hand on Rowan's chest. Right over the heartbeat. Rowan exhaled, and the door behind the other him folded inward, then upward, then vanished. The place that didn't happen had let go. And so had he. Rowan walked for what felt like days, though the sun never moved. Eventually he arrived at a low hill where trees grew in slow spirals. Each tree bore fruit, strange glowing and gently pulsing like breathing. A hand-carved sign read, "The Memory Orchard? Take only what is yours. Leave what you've carried too long." He stepped between the trees. Each fruit he passed shimmered with its own sound. A familiar laugh here, a whispered word there. He picked one, a small pear-shaped glow that sang like wind through his childhood window. When he bit into it, he was 12 years old again, riding a bike at dusk, the cool air rushing through his sleeves, headlights flashing behind him, and the sound of someone calling his name. Not urgent, not fearful, just fond. It faded like mist. Further on, he found a tree with branches low and weary. Beneath it sat a basket labeled, "For the things you no longer need to carry." He knelt beside it, and from his coat he drew a fear he didn't know he still had. The silence he used to survive things he didn't understand. A name he'd been called once that still echoed on bad days. He placed them all in the basket. The tree sighed, not sad, just relieved. And the ground beneath him felt softer. For the first time in many worlds, Rowan sat not because he was tired, but because he could. He closed his eyes beneath the low sky. When he opened them, a crow was waiting. It dropped a key into his lap, then flew away. The key was made of polished wood, smooth as bone. It weighed nearly nothing. A path now lay before Rowan, not made of stones or doors or sky, but of words, written across the ground in a spiraling script. If you've come this far, maybe it's time to ask, did you choose to dream or did the dream choose you? At the center of the spiral was a door. No frame, no hinges, just a door standing upright in the soil. He used the key. Inside was a single room. It looked like the inside of a child's imagination, walls painted with planets and blankets hung like tents. Toys and half-finished poems scattered the floor. On a desk sat a jar labeled, "Moments I Didn't Understand Until Later." And sitting on the floor, legs crossed, face quiet, was someone else. Rowan stepped in. The other person looked up. It was not him. Not exactly. Not a version of him. Not a guide. Just someone who had been watching. Not judging. Just listening. They didn't speak. But they held out a journal. Rowan took it. On the first page, "You've made it far enough to stop. You may continue if you like. But the dream no longer needs to show you the way." Rowan closed the book. He looked at the other person. They smiled, small, understanding, then blinked, and vanished. So Rowan sat and breathed, and let the quiet write something inside him that couldn't be spoken. Rowan stood from the place where the dream had been watching. There was no door, but he didn't need one. The walls of the room faded, not like dissolving, but like turning a page in a book you forgot you were reading. What came next was a room with no corners. Everything was round the floor, the ceiling, the air, even the echoes curved gently, like ripples in a bowl of still water. This room wasn't made of wood or stone. It was made of now. The present moment stretched soft and wide like linen sheets drying in the wind. In the center of the room was a spiral staircase that led nowhere. Above it, a skylight opened to a night sky unfamiliar and perfect. Rowan walked slowly. He wasn't trying to get anywhere anymore. He was simply moving through. Along the curved wall were inscriptions, not written but stitched into the space with light. You are not the result of every world you didn't reach. You are the whole that wandered through them. A chair appeared beneath him, or maybe he'd been sitting all along. A record played in the distance, waltz tempo, but too soft to dance to. A tea kettle sighed, though there was no kitchen. He felt something inside him uncoil. Maybe it had been a story. Maybe it had been a question. He didn't need to know which. He just needed to stop asking. And for the first time since all of this began, Rowan didn't feel like he was waiting. He felt like he had arrived. There was no sound of transition this time. Just a blink. And Rowan found himself in another room, this one full of doors. Each door glowed faintly. Some were half open. Others were sealed. One or two hovered a few inches above the ground, uncertain. A small brass sign stood in the center. "Every goodbye you never said." He opened the first door. Behind it was a bus station. Rain on the roof, two people standing apart, neither sure if they were supposed to hug. Rowan remembered this. He'd walked away too fast that day. The second door led to a hallway outside an apartment. Boxes stacked, a key left in the mailbox, a text message unsent forever glowing on the screen. The third opened to a quiet room, a bed, a chair beside it, a handheld too late, a voice never raised, just slowly gone. Rowan didn't cry. Not because he didn't feel it, but because the room didn't ask him to. It simply held the weight of things left unsaid, and allowed him to breathe anyway. In the far corner of the room was one door smaller than the rest. No label. Just wood warm under his fingers. He opened it, and found a younger version of himself sitting beside a tree. The boy looked up. "I didn't think you'd come back." Rowan sat beside him. "I didn't either," he said. They stayed there a long time, not talking, just existing, together again. Rowan stood again, not because it was time to move on, but because the moment had gently released him. The door behind him didn't close. It didn't need to. Ahead a path had formed, not paved, not marked, just woven from memory. He stepped forward. Each footfall sounded like something he'd once whispered in the dark. "I'm trying. It's okay. I don't know, but I'm still here." Soon he found himself in a new world, but not entirely new. A bridge from one dream, the sky from another, the smell of soup, the breeze from the river, the sound of the train, the faint shimmer of a mirror. Everything that had ever mattered, even a little, was here. A sign floated overhead. "Welcome to what you kept." A field stretched before him, filled with people, places, and moments stitched from familiarity and care. Not all were joyful, but none were painful anymore. He passed the lullaby seller who gave him a wink. The crow that once gave him the key circled once, then perched on a lamppost. A bench waited beside a tree with no leaves, and yet it hummed with life. Rowan sat. The air felt like a breath long held. A soft voice beside him, not from a person, but from the world itself, whispered, "This is not the end, but it's where endings go to rest." He closed his eyes and listened. Rowan walked again. Not quickly, not toward anything, but the road beneath him curved and curled and eventually led to a hill, gentle not steep, at the top of which stood a mirror. Just a mirror. No signs, no pedestal, no words etched in the frame. He approached it carefully and saw himself. Not a version, not a younger him, not a wiser future him. Just Rowan. Now, the mirror didn't shimmer. It didn't talk, but it understood. He looked into it for a long time. And slowly, as if unfolding, the reflection did something small, something powerful. It reached forward, not through the glass, just toward him as though to offer something. Rowan didn't touch the mirror. He didn't need to. He simply nodded. The mirror nodded back. Behind it, the world grew lighter. Not brighter, lighter. Less heavy, less tight, less searching. The road curved downward now, and there at the bottom of the hill was a house. Not one he recognized, but one that had always been waiting. The house waited. Not grand, not strange, just there. A porch light glowed amber, though there was no cord. A rocking chair creaked gently, though no wind stirred it. Rowan stood at the base of the path for a while. Then he stepped forward. Each footfall made a sound like turning pages. The doormat said nothing clever, just welcome. Not back. Not home. Just welcome. He didn't knock. The door opened like it had been watching the whole time. Inside was a warm, quiet room. Walls lined with books and soft-colored maps of places probably never existed. A fireplace flickering, even though no firewood had been added. A small table with a cup already waiting. And on the far wall, a framed photo, not of anyone in particular. Just the bench. The mirror. The cafe. The boy by the tree. The world that listened. The door that didn't ask questions. All of it together. like someone had been saving this story all along. Rowan sat on the couch, which let out the sigh of something long trusted. He picked up the cup. Steam curled into the air like a lullaby. There were no more doors, no more maps, no riddles or clocks. Just the sound of Elsewhere breathing around him, slow and safe and small. And in the silence a voice rose, not in his head, not in the room, but everywhere. You went far, didn't you? You asked so many questions. You looked and looked. And now it's okay to be still. Rowan set down the cup. He lay back, pulled the blanket up, and closed his eyes. The house settled, content to become quiet again. And Elsewhere, all around him, rested too. Thank you for traveling with us tonight, dreamer. We hope the passenger of Elsewhere brought you peace, wonder, and the deep stillness you deserve. Whether you're still awake or fast asleep, know this: it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to wander, and it's okay to rest. If this story helped you find quiet, consider subscribing to Sleep Story's Restless Minds for more dreamy adventures. We release new tales often, each crafted to slow your thoughts and ease you into sleep. Until next time, stay soft, stay curious,